All right, looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. Give a couple minutes for folks to trickle in, just to give a little bit of background on what we're doing today. Depending on where you're tuning in from, you could be on Twitch, you could be on X, on the Extism X account, or the Delibso X account, or on our YouTube account. Welcome. This is the first of many to come of community highlight series where we bring on an awesome builder who's doing some really cool work with Extism in an interesting domain. In Chris's case, it's in kind of the AI LLM agentic kind of field, and some really interesting stuff going on there, as I'm sure we're all familiar. And moving forward, we'll bring on some additional guests to kind of just talk about what they're working on, how Extism fits into that, what Extism unlocks, and ways we can continue to make the SDKs and PDKs more useful. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Christopher. Welcome. We've been following your work since you started doing, I think, the build in public videos, maybe the beginning of this year, and love seeing those. If you haven't, maybe we can drop a link. If you haven't seen those, we can drop a link in the video chat or elsewhere to get you on that thread, because the exhaustive nature of seeing inside of Christopher's mind as he's building out the functionality of OpenAgents is awesome. So maybe we can do a quick little round of intros and move on from there. I'll start. Just Steve, co-founder and CEO of Delibso. We make Extism. Most of you watching this probably know what that is. If not, it is the universal plugin system that leverages a technology called WebAssembly to make portable code executable across a number of different environments. Extism, you can read more about it at extism.org or on our GitHub at extism/extism. Christopher.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Christopher David, founder of OpenAgents, an AI agents marketplace, and super excited to discover Extism as we've been reasoning about how we build agents out of basically composable building blocks that can be both reusable and individually monetizable by developers. Our thesis is that this kind of individually monetizable and reusable plugins for agents is how we get past this problem that seems to plague the whole AI agent scene, which is that agents largely suck. To break that down a little bit more, like the agentic loops that people are running tend to be very brittle. They tend to hallucinate. They tend to not be production grade. It's really hard to point to real AI agents in the wild that are production quality, that are like good. One of the problems, I think, is that a lot of people are kind of reinventing the wheel. They're like grappling with these massive, complex agent frameworks full of all sorts of different abstractions. They're kind of building things for themselves. And it's kind of like if you were to try and build a JavaScript application by going and like writing all of the code that you would be getting from NPM by yourself. We think there needs to be that kind of equivalent of NPM for the increasingly what we'll call the AI agent economy. Extism seems to be the logical framework for that. I'll jump in a second to kind of share my screen and stuff. But Steve, have you guys thought through to this point any kind of intersection with AI, or how are you guys thinking about this?
Yeah, super early on, we one of the other co-founders, Benjamin Eckel, did some really interesting experiments, kind of on the inverse side of the equation, which is how to get an LLM to generate code and it to be compiled in a way that makes that code secure to execute by the LLM. So not just generating the code, but also executing that code in a sandbox. And we've seen a lot of things like this, right? Like the code interpreter inside of like a ChatGPT kind of experience, but it's really limited to like one language, one runtime, and then kind of like in the dark about like where is that code running, what does it have access to, what are the capabilities the code has, how do I give that code information or enhanced capabilities. And so some of the things that Ben was exploring are up on the extism.org blog. One of them is about just like isolating and sandboxing LLM generated code. And the other is about like productively creating like some tools that the LLM can generate and execute itself, which is pretty neat. And haven't seen like a ton of additional progress on that front outside of those experiments. And certainly people are doing code gen in like the kind of co-pilot style, but not a lot about like an autonomous agent generating its own code and executing that code in a secure manner that doesn't just like, make for a havoc-wreaking situation on whatever system the code's being executed on. And then we found OpenAgents, and we're really impressed with kind of the alignment on the mentality of creating reusable code and making that code available to something that knows how to execute that code, and also making that code portable. So like if your implementation today is in PHP and tomorrow is in Go, it doesn't really matter because that code can move inside of those host environments. So as you scale, or as you may want to run an agent at the edge or an agent on your mobile device, all that code is going to work and move into those environments and work equally well. So I think that was just really interesting to see your take on it and get a little closer to the project and kind of see the inner workings and how you guys are trying to apply some of this novel WebAssembly technology into the world of AI.
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to have found the kind of even basic AI content on your blog, because that kind of got my wheels turning. Okay, like here's people thinking in that direction, and here's some things that we've been thinking about. Let me share my screen here and kind of show where we're at. And let's see, screen sharing tip. Don't show those tips again. Let's do that. I think you can see this. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we've got a like 102 episode series of building this OpenAgents platform in public over the last 7 months. And I'll kind of show you like the first episode and the most recent episode. The teaser is that the most recent episode is called Agent Plugins UI. But the idea behind OpenAgents began after watching the Dev Day presentation from OpenAI in November of 2023. And they kind of went over their upgrades to GPT-4 and all sorts of different things. And Sam Altman ended that presentation with his sort of like one last thing at the end, like the cherry on top. The thing that they said that they were most excited about is this idea of agents, or what they call GPTs, like sort of one step in the direction of agents. And they were going to be launching this basically no code web UI, allowing people to create GPTs using a base model, any of the like OpenAI models, paired with prompt engineering, paired with files and knowledge, and eventually custom actions, so that you could then list this personal GPT, this personal basic agent, in eventually a directory and a marketplace. And they would do revenue sharing. If there was any usage of that, they would pay the agent builder. And that helped kind of open my eyes, as some of the previous experiments I had done around, building up GPU compute marketplaces and just kind of like trying to find my footing as an entrepreneur and like what I want to contribute to the AI economy. That helped me kind of like really see that I actually do agree that the future of applied AI is going to be what we might call agents, or these compound AI systems that eventually every person, every company is going to have one or more of these compound AI systems or agents working on their behalf. And this is something that we want to participate in part because I just thought that OpenAI was going to half-ass that, particularly on the monetization. They're like, okay, we're going to build a GPT store. I thought, okay, what is that likely to look like? I thought it would be likely to look like what X, formerly Twitter, a platform that I love, but which has relatively restrictive creator monetization. I've been on Twitter for 10 years and I don't qualify for any of the I don't have the 3 million impressions or whatever, even though I'm adding all sorts of amazing content and I am not getting paid for it. Maybe I should, but I figured that like at best, OpenAI would launch some sort of like gated, curated creator monetization platform like that. They said explicitly, eventually months later, that they would be starting the payout program with a focus on the US. And it's sort of been like, okay, here's an opportunity for us to lean into jurisdictions that OpenAI will never care about or will delay caring about, that have a lot of builders, like India, like the Philippines, like many other places in the world other than the US. My background is in Bitcoin and building applications in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And to me, Bitcoin was like the logical way that we pay people programmatically in a sort of decentralized, uncensorable, unstoppable way. Hey, look, if you do anything to contribute to an agentic workflow, whether it is creating a little GPT or agent equivalent via a web UI, or you're building something relevant via the developer API, or you're writing some custom plugin, you should get paid proportional to the usage, not once every week if you meet some criteria. It should be as simple as you sign up, you get paid. Streaming revenue to you, ideally every minute. Fast forward 7 months, we have now built that. We have built the, what we call the agent store. Over the last couple of weeks, we turned on the revenue share. So we now actually have like this working, very basic beta, kind of a little bit janky, but it basically functional version of this at openagents.com called the agent store. You can create a little agent similar to the GPT store. You can connect knowledge to it with basic RAG. You can connect prompts to it. We just recently rolled out the plugins piece of it, but the idea is that if you are a non-technical person, you can create a agent via the web UI and get paid proportional to the usage by connecting your Bitcoin address. And we make it easy for you to, or trying to make it easy for you to sign up with that if you're not familiar with that, and get paid proportional to usage. So we have a script running that every minute sweeps any of the usage from agents, because we're letting people set a sort of price per message that the agents will cost. And then we're just sweeping all of it minus like a 10% fee to the agent builder. So aside from that, we also want to enable developers to write agent plugins and get paid not just for a single agent, but if your plugin gets used by 1,000 agents, you should be paid proportional to all of that usage for any value that that plugin adds to that agentic workflow. OpenAI, we are now like beyond the OpenAI feature set. They do not have extensibility built into their, imaginings of GPTs. They have, for some reason, this like arbitrary barrier between the no-code GPTs on the one side and the like developer assistance API and other APIs on the other side. There's like this wall between them. And we've seen all sorts of developers say like, hey, can't we just build agents in a cool way via the assistance API and list them in a marketplace? Like, there's been no movement on that at all. And 7 months later, they've literally paid apparently 0 developers so far as we can tell. So, hey, we've only paid 30 developers, but we've paid infinity% more developers than OpenAI. But, if we look out, like, where are we going to take this? The idea here is that we want to enable developers to sort of collectively build upgrades for agents. And like we were saying, the sort of equivalent of the NPM package ecosystem, to do that same thing for agents. So you don't need to build all of the different primitives. You don't need to wrestle with agent frameworks yourself. If you want to build an agent that's maybe a little bit different than one that already exists on the marketplace, you should be able to easily click to fork. Maybe you pull in something else, or maybe you need to commission a custom plugin. So you put up a $100 bounty and someone in India like resolves that. Now you've got your custom agent that you can easily deploy via API or any other things. So we want to be the long-term vision here is to be sort of like a Hugging Face for agents, like to do for applied AI and the like agent builder, business facing AI community, what Hugging Face has been doing successfully for the AI ML research community. Enabling some like community discovery around plugins, but with a real core of monetization. And a big part of this, we just think we're going to be leaning heavily on this idea of extensibility. Extism seems to be the absolute perfect framework for this. We've got about 30 plugins that developers have written so far. You can see at openagents.com/plugins. Very basic, and the UI here is kind of scary and foreboding to this point. If you go and create a plugin, we got some metadata, name, description, website, privacy policy terms, tags, upload the WebAssembly file for your plugin, input, secrets, environment, all the stuff that just kind of like maps to the Extism API with, the payments piece. And, this is hard and we need to simplify this and et cetera. But we have to have sort of like basic functionality working. Now, we want to be able to combine this with the kinds of like inspectability and hosting and WASM best practices that Extism is by far the best on. So I'll shut up now and throw it to you, Steve. Any thoughts on this and kind of like how Extism can help us deliver on our vision here?
Yeah, totally. Well, first I want to back up because I think there's an interesting point to make about OpenAgents platform, particularly as it relates to like where OpenAI maybe stops and where like you guys are kind of innovating and bringing more to the equation. And I feel like the OpenAgents platform being able to kind of like multiplex on top of all the different multi-model backends provides for a really unique experience. So for someone who's maybe just kind of getting into this space, wants to experiment, your platform seems to provide a really cool test bed for all these other places where you can, get value from a model and experiment with a large variety of those. How did you go about like implementing all of these different integrations, and how has that been in terms of like where you're finding interesting adoption? Is ChatGPT and GPT-4o or Mistral, like what are the popular models you're seeing usage on, and how do they differ from model to model?
Yeah, we began wanting to like not reinvent the wheel of what ChatGPT has already pioneered in terms of UI UX. Fastest growing consumer app to 100 million users, apparently just recently beaten by Luma, who got it in 4 days instead of 5 days. But anyway, like everyone's accustomed to chat UI, so we said, okay, if we're building agent store, just kind of starting with their UI UX seems to make sense. So we sort of, the first product we put out was basically our sort of equivalent of ChatGPT, but with any top model. Like there's no reason, and this is in part to kind of scratch my own itch. Like I have been using ChatGPT Pro for 13 months until recently. $20 a month paying, happy customer, heavily used it, well worth it. But then like Claude 3 came out and their models were so good at like certain code tasks were better than GPT, but to use it, I have to pay them $20. So I'm like paying these two services $20 a month. It's like, how many of these services am I going to pay? Because I want to try out Gemini. It's like, wait a second, all of these services have APIs. Let's just let you use the top 15 models. And so that's what our like basic first thing that we launched was like, okay, pro subscription, $10 a month, get access to all these ones via API. And then, having that as sort of like the base substrate on top of which now we can experiment with agents, but not within a particular ecosystem. Like, can you imagine that Google's Gemini agent builder, which they're rolling out, are they going to let you use OpenAI models or Cohere models? Is OpenAI going to let you use Mistral models? Probably not, because everyone is trying to build and push their own product. We are happily agnostic to this. When a new model comes out, Perplexity put out a new model, Cohere put out a new model, Mistral put out a new model. We just like add it to our thing. All the APIs are more or less the same. And so we can add a new support for a new model in usually like 10 or 15 minutes. We just push it up and it's live. And then to be able to then also allow agent builders, I can't even remember if we pushed this live yet. We've been making a lot of changes recently, but if not now, very soon, like being able to specify the custom base model per agent. If you're building a coding agent, maybe you want to have it use CodeStroll from Mistral. If you want, maybe you want to use some custom crazy niche model off of Hugging Face. One of the models that we have live now, Satoshi 7B, that is a Hugging Face inference endpoint with this model that's not hosted anywhere other than Hugging Face. And Hugging Face has like 200, I don't know how many models they have there, but like 200,000 different models. Like there's no reason that we can't make any or all of those available to agent builders. But right now it's like, how is any one person going to make sense of 200,000 or however many models that they have? Like there needs to be some sort of discovery mechanism where people can say, hey, this particular model, maybe paired with this data set, paired with this RAG algorithm, paired with this plugin that this person wrote, this combination of things achieves this result that is super valuable to me personally or to my business or hits this benchmark. And then someone else would say, oh, wait a second, that got 5 stars. That's trending. I care about that use case. Click the fork and let me try with this. That doesn't really exist right now. There's people kind of competing on these like academic benchmarks and doing things, but like doing that in the context of like applied AI. Anyway, I feel like the monetization piece is a key unlock for that, because now we just really need discovery of what people are actually willing to pay for.
Totally. I think the monetization piece is obviously a clear differentiator, and I think a missing piece of the puzzle for all of these platforms. And I think your decision to lean into the biggest open payments system we've ever seen as humanity was really intriguing. And I'm curious if you could give us kind of like the explain it like I'm 5 on Nostr and the Litecoin network and so the Lightning network on Bitcoin, and just like what the primer is there, and how to maybe experiment with that and kind of get involved.
Yeah, the first kind of light bulb for me a year ago, as I was kind of exploring the intersection of Bitcoin and AI, just one of our advisors like posed the question, like, how are AI agents going to pay each other? Oh, are they going to be opening bank accounts? No. Are you going to give them control of your bank account? Hallucinating stuff that doesn't exist? No. Are you going to be having them navigate like 1,000 different like crypto shit coins, run by people that are trying to get rich? No. You're going to have the agents speak the most neutral money that's like optimized for the internet, that can enable like fast global payments, instantly anywhere in the world, accessible to everybody. And that's Bitcoin and Lightning Network with like a 15-year track record. So like that's a pretty clear answer to that question. Beyond that, so it was sort of like, okay, we think that agents are going to be paying each other over the sort of Bitcoin Lightning Network. Coming at it from the angle of like the GPT store, this was sort of like, okay, here's how we can apply that idea to like a go-to-market strategy that like evolves beyond the OpenAI model of like the platform is going to be paying users using those same benefits of like fractional revenue share payments like every minute. That's possible easily now through the Lightning Network. So both like agents should be able to pay agents, users should be able to pay agents should be able to, like every combination of like users and agents, but then eventually maybe like multiple agents or multiple, there's so many just like possibilities that become unlocked through this. Okay, the more important point there is, if people say like, well, I don't know about Bitcoin, or I don't want my agents to be paying its Bitcoin, or have to think in terms of like the Bitcoin denomination. Okay, guess what? You don't have to. A super important distinction that like almost no one outside of the like hardcore Bitcoiner community gets is there's a distinction between the Bitcoin infrastructure network, like the Bitcoin platform or ecosystem, and then Bitcoin, the currency and the denomination. Some of the innovations in the last few years have been projects like, for example, a project called Taproot Assets from the Lightning, for one of the top Lightning companies called Lightning Labs, that runs the most popular Lightning implementations, which for those who don't know, Lightning is like the layer 2 on top of Bitcoin that enables like fast, instant global payments. They've got a product called Taproot Assets that enables any currency, like any kind of token you specify, to use Lightning as sort of like the payment rails. And the big use case we're focused on there is a digital dollar, which some people call stable coins. And so you may not need to care at all or learn at all about Bitcoin as a denomination. Keep that as a separate conversation. But if you want agents paying other agents in dollars, but still leveraging the benefits of the Bitcoin global permissionless network, like that's possible / like rolling out slowly now in beta and stuff like that. And then you've got other companies like Lightspark, run by David Marcus, who until recently was like the president of PayPal and led the Libra project at Facebook, and has since built this company around kind of like enterprise Lightning adoption. And they're kind of taking that idea one step further and enabling people to use the Lightning Network as gateways between even fiat currencies. So if some exchange in the Philippines has figured out how to enable people in the Philippines to be able to easily cash out to a bank account, it enables someone who has an account with that to be able to sort of like receive payments in the same network and have things cashed out where they don't even really know that like Bitcoin's being used in the background. The point is that we now have like a substrate of global payments that is like, at least to me, very clearly the logical payment substrate for AI agents. And if we can sort of build the infrastructure that enabled developers to build sort of on top of this and get paid and have a way to like take the things that they build, combine them, sell them, that's the important point. Like, what are people actually willing to pay for? And this is, I think, a problem with the AI economy, the AI ecosystem right now, is you've got so many VC dollars pouring in. Everyone trying to build picks and shovels. Everyone's trying to build their agent framework and like all this infrastructure build out. Like, no one's pointed to where the actual revenue is going to come from. And that's in part because we don't have actual like market price signals of what people are actually willing to pay for. So that's kind of what part of our approach is like, throw out everything. There's no free lunch. You don't get to use anything for free. It's, you have to pay the fee that the agent builder sets for that agent. Now, right now, if you go to openagents.com, there's no good agents. There's like basic ones, but not anything that people are like really willing to pay for. That's because it's just the prompt engineering plus the RAG that kind of OpenAI didn't think was too compelling. The compelling part comes from the plugins. The compelling part comes from, hey, I want this agent to be able to look up the price of Bitcoin, to be able to connect to read an RSS feed, connect to some user's account. There's all sorts of like really hairy considerations around like security and permissions that we're happy that people like you are going to help figure that out. But having that marketplace, we just think that that is like what's necessary to get beyond. And it's enabled in part by open networks of money, Bitcoin, Lightning, and related transport mechanisms. There's like related communications networks that are adjacent to that. The one that we're using is called Nostr, which is enables sort of like a decentralized registry of plugins. So if OpenAgents goes out of business tomorrow, it doesn't really matter. All the plugins that we're listing are going to be available in this decentralized ecosystem that everybody can kind of read and write to. So, and I'm going to kind of pull this back to an idea that you had mentioned, Steve, about there's a number of developers have been starting to ask about this idea of sharing functions, like the idea of function calling, and to be able to build up sort of a registry of these functions as plugins, perhaps, that people don't need to be rewriting their own, or like what's the best RAG thing that I can pull into a pipeline? What's the best functions? If I can take one of the like next demos we're working on over the next couple of weeks, or the next features we want to roll out is, okay, we've got these 20 plugins. How do we format that into categories? Imagine that we have 1,000 plugins and fit those into the context window of an agent and say, look, here's the functions that you have access to. You really have access to like 6,000 different things, and you sort them by categories. Like, you know, if there's financial analysis or there's this third-party integration, and just let it kind of loop and traverse and pick the best plugin. Then we're building up like agentic functionality collectively.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really powerful.
I totally agree. And I love that like WebAssembly plays a part here. And the ability to kind of dynamically connect and pipeline these things with intelligence layered on top, provided by the agent, who's able to discover new functionality based on a task it's been asked to carry out. Mid-task, make a search, find a tool, call functionality within that tool, given some information from maybe this registry, like what are the functions it has, what maybe there's a function calling model applied here that describes the inputs and outputs, you know, of these functions and what the kind of effect of that function should be. And then download dynamically the function itself and run it locally, where it's not up to the developer all the time of the agent to include inline like Python or TypeScript code that they write themselves to handle very static circumstances. And instead, we're kind of like really truly in the world of this autonomous, I know I need to do some work. How do I do the work? Let me find a tool. Let me execute that tool and benefit from this kind of shared environment of code that really wouldn't be possible with a WASM. And again, if you want to run the code locally, I think there are some kind of major security wins here, like you mentioned. That like if I'm operating on sensitive data, and like if we're really going to see this whole agent thing through, it should be an extension of me, right? Like the agent should effectively be kind of like my mini me operating out in the autonomous world and doing things on my behalf. So it might have some sensitive information about me. It might have my banking information. It might have, you know, my address, my home address, my social security number. Like what it knows about me, we're yet to really see the full extent of. But you can imagine there is certainly some sensitive information in there. And so instead of stitching together all these API calls to like integrate this data into that system remotely, and now that system has this data maybe unauthenticated because I just want to use its functionality. Instead of that, like I can bring the code to me and execute that code locally on the agent. And WebAssembly really is kind of the only thing around that is providing that kind of functionality. So I'm really excited to see where Extism can help kind of move the needle forward, and really appreciate the work you guys are doing to experiment on that and to make something really cool and usable that already people are finding a lot of value from.
Can you, Steve, can you give the 30-second spiel on like what XTP is and how kind of products that you're building can enable some of this?
Yeah, totally. Thanks for asking. We haven't talked a ton about XTP yet because it's still kind of in the design phase and working with some companies on partnerships and getting it integrated. But XTP is basically a layer that provides plugin lifecycle management on top of Extism. And what does that mean? It means, how do I allow a guest user of my system, which I want to extend and make extensible to that user, access to ship me some plugins to modify the behavior of my software? How do I give them temporary access to do that? How do I authenticate them? How do I run simulations and tests on those plugins to make sure that when I do integrate them and call their functionality, that they're going to do what they're supposed to do, testing and benchmark and performance. And then how do I like access that code from a platform to be executed for the right person at the right time inside my app? So it really kind of takes care of the whole plugin lifecycle management, application extensibility for a number of different environments where you might want to execute untrusted user code inside of your application. So lots more to come on XTP, but if you're interested, you can get a little sneak peek at getxtp.com.
We want it.
Well, Chris, we're at time. I don't know if we have questions. I've kind of lost track of the source of engagement from the folks watching, but there are a number of you. So if you
people can ask us questions on, well, we're on X. Check out openagents.com. It's still heavily under development. Please follow us on X, OpenAgents Inc. I think the link was shared somewhere. And if you have any questions, just add it to that DM thread, and we'll see it and respond to it.
Perfect. Well, we are at time, so maybe we'll move questions to async. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Christopher, really appreciate your time. Keep up the good work. We're really excited to work with you guys and help however we can. And yeah, tune into the next one. We'll make some announcements soon on what that is. But until then, enjoy your week, and we'll see y'all later.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, Chris.